All right, welcome to another Cameron's Corner. I'm going to keep trucking along here on the creation story. And I have to tell you guys, I find it really difficult for me to be able to share with you everything that I want to share and to do it effectively and to do it in a way that is meaningful for you all. And it's honestly like I have a little bit of turmoil over it. So hopefully as I share this stuff, it clicks for you all and it does, it helps because I do want you to sense the grandeur of the story and how it really does testify of Jesus Christ and also supports the plan of salvation. All right, so with that in mind, I want to share with you a scripture from Abraham chapter 3. And it's one we read all the time. And it says, in verse 24, and there stood one among them that was like unto God. And he said unto those who were with him, we will go down, for there is space there, and we will take of these materials, and we will make an earth whereon these may dwell. And we will prove them herewith to see if they will do all things whatsoever the Lord their God shall command them. So I've spent a lot of time trying to show you all that the creation story testifies of Jesus Christ and his atonement, but it also is told to us in such a way to help us understand God's purpose in creating it, which is to prove us and test us. Okay? And I think that's exactly what the story of, or what's happens in 2 Nephi 2. This is like one of our scriptures that we refer to all the time to help us understand the purpose of life. But when we read it, we think Lehi is talking about opposition. The opposition is a big part of life, to come here to earth and experience opposition. And we will talk about it as if Lehi, was told this by the Spirit, independent of any scripture study. Now, I do think he was told this by the Spirit or by God or, somebody, but it wasn't independent of his scripture study. It's after Lehi gets the brass plates and he's reading from the brass plates that I think it's the creation story, and he learns about the law of opposition. And the reason why I think that is because he tells us about opposition in 2 Nephi 2, but he says that in verse 15, to bring about his eternal purposes in the end of man, after he had created our first parents and the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, and in fine all things which are created, it must needs be that there was an opposition, even the forbidden fruit in opposition to the tree of life, the one being sweet and the other bitter. Wherefore the Lord God gave unto man that he should act for himself, wherefore man could not act for himself, save it should be that he was enticed by the one or the other. So Lehi is reading the creation story, and he is seeing that an aspect of creation, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, are opposites of each other. And so he's saying they needed to be opposites of each other so that we would have a choice. We'd have a test. Our agency would have meaning. It would have consequence. It would matter, right? And Lehi is not just making this up. He's reading from the scriptures and learning about this. So let me show you more where he says, and I, Lehi, according to things which I have read, must needs suppose that an angel of God, according to that which is written, had fallen from heaven, wherefore he became a devil, having sought that which is evil before God. And because he had fallen from heaven and had become miserable, he saw also the misery of all mankind. So the devil is part of the opposition that is woven into the fabric of creation, according to the things Lehi had read. And Lehi also, when he talks about opposition over here, like in verse 11, he says, it must needs be that there is an opposition in all things. There has to be all this stuff. If not, it must needs be a compound in one. Wherefore, it should be one body, it must remain as dead, having no life, neither death nor corruption, nor incorruption, happiness, no misery. Verse 12, wherefore it must needs have been created for a thing of naught. See, he's talking about the earth. the earth, would have been created for a thing of naught if there wasn't opposition woven into the creation itself. Let's see. Wherefore there would have been no purpose in the end of its creation. So you see, Lehi, this great sermon that we always quote and cite and everything, we fail to recognize. The reason why I'm harping on this is because we fail to recognize often where Lehi got the idea from. And he got the idea from reading the creation story. He's reading about creation and Satan, Lucifer's fall from heaven, all the stuff we've been talking about so far. And that's how he's like, oh, there needs to be opposition in all things in order for us to be able to have agency to act. Let me show you one more thing, okay? D&C 93, it says that man was in the beginning with God. Intelligence, see, there's another reference to in the beginning. So in the beginning, man was there too. We weren't, before the earth was made, we were there. That's what that phrase would mean, in the beginning. Man was also in the beginning with God. Intelligence or the light of truth was not created or made, neither indeed can be. The stuff we're made out of can't be created, it can't be made. We'll get into that in a minute. And then all truth is independent in that sphere in which God has placed it to act for itself, as all intelligence also, otherwise there is no existence. So God places everything in a sphere to act for itself. It's like, this is the creation story. He set up the creation so that we could act. Otherwise there's no existence. Without agency, you and I are basically, we're just as dead and purposeless as the earth would have been without opposition, right? Like, we would, we need the opposition, we need the options to choose between in order for us to have a real agency. So I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint I made a long time ago that gets at this. Okay. Oh, my light in my room is maybe I can block it with my head. There we go. Or I'll turn this way. Here we go. Okay. So I love this quote. C.S. Lewis says, the freedom of a creature must mean freedom to choose, and choice implies the existence of things to choose between. A creature with no environment would have no choices to make. So you see, even C.S. Lewis agrees with this idea that you have to have an environment, and that's what the creation story is. It's describing the environment in which you and I will make our choices. Okay? All right, so having said that, let me come back. I'm going to show you all the literary structure of the story of creation in Genesis 1. Okay? There is a literary structure. And basically what you have is, before day 1, there's water and darkness and the Spirit of God. Okay, that's in verse 2 of Genesis 1. And it says that the earth is without form and that it is void or empty. Okay? Days 1, 2, and 3 are explaining how God gives the earth and heaven form. Days 4, 5, and 6 explain how God fills the earth, gives it, he's solving, days 1, 2, and 3 are solving the problem of the earth being without form, and days 4, 5, and 6 are solving the problem of the earth being empty. So, and then days 1 and 4 are in parallel with each other. So this is like Hebrew poetry, okay? So day 1 talks about the creation of day and night, and day 4, so that's giving it form. You give day 1 as God is giving day and night form, and then on day 4, he populates day and night with the sun, moon, and stars, so that day and night are no longer empty. Okay, so, and those 2 days are in parallel with each other, and meaning that they're meant to like riff off each other. So the story isn't told sequentially, like it's told poetically. Okay, and now this could be the sequence. I don't know. I don't think it matters. I think the point is that the poetry is saying that day 1 and day 4 are somehow tied to each other and fulfilling each other. Okay, like good Hebrew poetry does. Day 2 and day 5 are in parallel with each other. Okay, so day 2 is God separates the waters above from the waters beneath, and he places a firmament in between those waters. So he's giving form. Okay, so that's what he's doing. He's solving the problem of form on day 2. And the thing that he gives form to is the firmament, and he calls it heaven. And then on day 5, he populates the waters above and the waters below. Or when I say the waters above, like the area close to the waters above. So he puts birds, he creates birds and fish and sea monsters. Okay, that's the waters above and the waters below. So like the stuff up above, he fills up with birds, and the stuff below, he puts fish and sea monsters in there. Okay, and it is sea monsters. It's not whales as it's translated in the King James Version. The Hebrew is sea monsters or dragons. Day 3 and 6 are in parallel with each other. So day 3, he's giving form to the earth. He separates the waters beneath from the earth. So he's giving form to the earth, and then he puts vegetation and trees on the earth. So he gives it form, and he starts to populate it, you could say, with vegetation. But then day 6 is when he puts like domesticated animals, creeping things, and wild animals, and humans on the earth. All right, so you see, there's a poem here basically, and there's a structure to it. And then the pre-creation state of water, darkness, and spirit, and the Spirit of God, is in parallel with the Sabbath, day 7. So the day 7 is like, basically the Sabbath day. The Lord finishes his creative work, and everything's at rest, at peace. That's the Sabbath day, basically. And parallelism can take many forms. It can be like synonymous parallelism, meaning like they relate to each other, and one shows like a fulfillment of the other. So like days 1 and 2 and 3 are in parallel with 4, 5, and 6. And 4, 5, and 6 are like showing the fulfillment of days 1, 2, and 3. They're showing how those things that get formed get populated with stuff. The pre-creation and the Sabbath are in parallel because they're antithetical. Okay, the Sabbath is the opposite of the pre-creation state. In the pre-creation state, where everything's chaotic and dark, and the Spirit of God is hovering over it, going to start the process of creation. The Sabbath is when the Spirit of God like prevails over it all, and the Sabbath, and there's peace and rest. Okay, so that's like the poetic structure of the creation story. And if you go to the, I'm going to show you all now another slide that I created many years ago. Okay, I'm going to skip on. Here we go. New heavens and new earth. I got to make that look a little better. Okay, you can see it in the old earth in Genesis 1. There's day and night, and there's land and sea, there's sun, moon, and stars, there's chaos monsters, and there's the curse and a fall that comes later. In Revelation, it describes a new heaven and a new earth. And Revelation 21 says there's no more night. Revelation 21 says there's no more sea in the new earth and the new creation. Revelation 21:23 says there's no sun, moon, or stars. There's no time, because we'll be in the presence of God, who will be the light. And so like if you guys remember, like in the sixth seal of the book of Revelation, the sun and the moon and the stars like fall from the sky, or like the stars fall from the sky, and the sun is darkened and the moon turns to blood or whatever. It's like, so you see that all that stuff is God's new creation. He's taking the old creation and reforming it into something new. And in the new thing, he doesn't need sun and moon and stars anymore. So they're being like erased from existence in the story. That's what's happening. It scares the crap out of us, because it's like, oh my goodness, like the stars will fall from the sky, and the sun and the moon would basically vanish. I mean, that's scary. There'd be no more sea, no more night. That doesn't sound as scary, right? That might sound a little more pleasant. But it's because God is making a new heaven and a new earth. And the process of creation it's like the process of construction, right? It can be, things are getting torn down, there's some demolition happening, and then there's some new stuff being put in place, and, it can be a little scary. And then Isaiah and Revelation 19 also tell us that there'll be no more chaos monsters. Like the devil is the 7-headed dragon in the book of Revelation, and he's destroyed. So in the original creation in Genesis 1, there are chaos monsters, but in the new heaven and new earth, there won't be. And in Revelation 22, we're told there's no more curse and fall. So like all of the elements that are negative in the original creation will be gone in the new creation. Okay, so why am I sharing this with you all? The reason why I'm sharing this is further support that we should read the original creation perhaps more symbolically or typologically, right? Like, is nighttime itself really like bad? Like, why does God need to get rid of nighttime in the new earth? Why does he need to get rid of the sea? Like, the sea isn't inherently bad, right? Why does he need to get rid of the sun and the moon and the stars? I mean, is he going to for real? I don't know. I think what it really means is that there just won't be darkness in our lives anymore in the new heaven and new earth. So there's no more night, right? There's no more sea, meaning, and we'll get into what the sea is, but it's basically a symbol of chaos. And so there will be no more chaos in the new heaven and the new earth. We won't need the sun and the moon and the stars because the book of Revelation tells us that God and Jesus Christ will be the light for us. Like, so, you know, the sun and the moon and stars aren't necessary anymore. Like, it's a good thing, right? It's like, but again, will there literally not be a sun and moon and stars that we won't see anymore? I don't know. Probably not. There'll probably be an ocean still. There'll probably be, you know, sun and moon and stars still. It's just these things are being used typologically or symbolically to explain God's purpose and plan in the earth, okay? And he tells the story through creation because it tells us, the symbolism is meant to say that it's woven into the fabric of things. Like, this is the way God intended it to be, and it's part of the natural order of things, okay? So when I go back and I read this creation story here, and I look at day one, and God is creating day and night, then if I'm going to use Revelation to help me understand that, or the scriptures at all to help me understand what that means, and maybe that's why Lehi would say there was an opposition in all things, because right there on day one, there is an opposition that God sets up. There's day and night, and day is the light, and night is the darkness. That's actually what happens on day one. Is God says, "Let there be light." And he divides the light from the darkness, which was already there in the pre-creation state, because darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God takes that darkness and gives it a purpose in his new creation in the earth. In the, you know, when I say new creation, I mean in the Genesis creation. He gives it a purpose, and it's in opposition to the daytime, which is the light. Okay, and then, you know, there's waters above and beneath, and there's a heaven. So there's another opposition. The firmament is heaven. It's the symbol of order and peace, whereas the waters is the symbol of chaos. So woven into the fabric of this plan is chaos and order, light and dark. That's day one and day two. And day three is there's also earth and sea, and the earth is justice. It brings forth after its own kind. You know, whatever you plant in it, it reproduces. You know, so if you put an apple seed into the earth, it'll produce an apple tree and apple fruit. And so it represents justice, you know. And the sea, again, is the opposite of justice. It's chaos, right? And so anyway, I'm going to get into these days in more elaboration here in a minute, or maybe in a future Marco Polo. I'm just trying to point out that the story is told in such a way that it supports the idea that God set this up with opposites so that you and I could be tested, so, you know, to fulfill the plan of salvation. And that woven into this fabric of things too will be a testimony of Jesus Christ and his atonement. Okay? And that, you know, when people say, well, like all the time people say, did God set Adam and Eve up? And the answer is yes, he did. But not without their consent. That everybody was there in the Grand Council and consented and said, yeah, let's set this thing up so that we can be tested, right? And once the test is over, then in the new heaven and new earth in Revelation, all the stuff that was there to like test us will be gone. All the night and the sea and the sun and moon and stars and the chaos monsters and everything will all be gone. But God incorporated all that stuff into this first creation in Genesis, because the point was to go down and take of the materials that were there so that we can make an earth whereon these may dwell and be tested to see if they'll do whatever God says that they'll do, right? Like, that's the point, okay? So, and it's just in the nature of things, you know, and we'll get into what I mean by that as I explain the days. And I'll try to show, again, how Jesus Christ and the atonement is woven into the fabric of all this too, because it's part of God's plan. All right. So that is, I think that was everything I wanted to share with you in this Marco Polo. And I think what I'll do next time is actually start with the pre-creation state, and then I'll work through day 1, 2. Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll do the pre-creation state, and then I'll do I got to do day 1 and 2, and then I'll do them in order. And we'll just get to the Sabbath. And then we'll go to Genesis chapter 2, which does a recapitulation, you could say, like it tells another story of creation that's slightly different, and we'll go over that. But for now, this is good enough. Oh, one last thing. The literary structure I'm showing you here of Genesis is Genesis is part of a larger literary structure. So the Pentateuch, they call it, or the Torah, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, is also, like some scholars have pointed out, that it also has a literary structure. So like and it's a chiasm. You guys know chiasmus, right? And the middle of the chiasm is like the point of it all. It's the thing that is like the main thesis of the poem, of the larger poem. And the middle of the chiasmus of the Pentateuch, of the Torah, is Leviticus chapter 16, which is the chapter that describes the Day of Atonement, okay? And the beginning of the chiasm is this creation story. And the end of the chiasm is when the Israelites enter into the promised land, like they're basically going into a new creation. They're leaving behind the chaos of Egypt, you know, and how did they get there? They passed through water, right? Like this is all, if you guys need to think this way, symbolically, the thing is set up typologically, that the Israelites lived in Egypt, which was death and darkness. And there was even darkness as one of the signs that Moses used to free the Israelites, right? And then they passed through water. And when they come out, they wander through a wilderness, which we'll talk about in Genesis chapter 2. The beginning of creation there is a wilderness instead of water. And the wilderness is like also a symbol of chaos. And then they come through the chaos and they pop out into a new promised land, which is basically a new creation, okay? And so the story starts with chaos and a new creation. In the middle of it is the Day of Atonement, and then the end of it in the Torah, that is, and the end of Deuteronomy, is they're entering into the promised land, into a new creation. So the point I'm making is that, like, the Hebrew Bible is very literary. It's like a giant poem, okay? And if we were to read it like that, we would get way more out of it but instead we bring to it our standards of reading it, and we're like, this must comply with my standards of history, right? And so then you want it to be sequential and, you know, the facts only, no spin, no hyperbole, no symbolism. Like if you were to ever write a report in history, you wouldn't be allowed to do any of those things. And the Hebrew Bible is the exact opposite. There's tons of symbolism, tons of typology, tons of hyperbole. Events aren't always told sequentially. They're set up in a way to be poetic. Now, it doesn't mean that these things didn't happen, and it doesn't mean that they're fictional. It just means that if you want to understand what's going on, you need to put on your literary lenses, okay? And remember that all things were told to bear record of Christ. And all right, so I'll stop for now, and then we'll jump into the pre-creation in the next Marco Polo.